Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this audit meeting on a usually very wet September morning. Do we have any apologies?
No, convener, no apologies.
Are there any declarations of interest? No. Okay. Moving to the last minutes. Are we all agreed, or is there any concerns?
Happy to agree, convener.
Agreed.
Thank you.
Agreed.
Then we'll progress to the audit progress report then, please. Thank you. Isabel.
Thank you, convener. Good morning, everybody. The purpose of the report is to provide an update on where we are with completing our 22-23 and our 23-24 internal audit plans. At the June Audit Committee, I reported that there were 4 22-23 reviews still in progress. Paragraphs 3.1 and 3.2 set out the details of those 4 reviews, with details on the scope and the findings found at Appendix 1. The 23-24 internal audit plan was agreed at the April Audit Committee. Paragraph 3.3 highlights that 1 assignment is at draft report stage and 4 are in progress. Appendix 3 provides a summary of progress with the 23-24 internal audit plan in its entirety. As members know, on a quarterly basis, internal audit identify what look like duplicate creditor payments. We then investigate these results to confirm if they are overpayments. The last quarter results from April to June 23 can be seen at paragraph 3.5. I'd ask members to note the recommendations and the conclusions. That is that the team are making reasonable progress with completing 23-24 internal audit work. If you've got any questions, I'm happy to try and answer. Thank you.
Councillor Meikle-John.
Thank you, and thank you to Isabel and the team for their work. It's good to see that we're managing to catch up as well. But I'd quite like to ask the Director about the Legionella management arrangements. I was very aware as we were coming out of COVID that Legionella and the testing regime became an issue, not just for Falkirk Council, across the district, across the country then, and we did a lot of work to review our practices and processes at this time. So I'm a wee bit surprised that to have no assurance, a little bit disappointed, and wanted to ask the Director a wee bit about why we have a number of buildings either failing around the checking, in the cases where we're not planning the preventative maintenance, temperatures are also not being checked, and to how we've got to this position when I really had felt that we did have a review at that time and a fairly robust regime in place, and want to know why that's not, we've got to where we are, but also what are we going to do to make sure that we have a clear action plan that will bring us back onto track and be able to give the assurance that certainly all elected members would want across the piece in relation to all our buildings. So I'll just maybe start with that just now, convener, if that's okay.
Welcome.
Through you, convener. Just to say, sorry, I think there's an echo. We take the findings of the report really seriously. Clearly, this isn't where we want Falkirk Council to be. I'm sorry that we're in that situation, but I'm reassured that Paul Kettrick and colleagues from right across the council have put in place a significant range of actions. And I think it would be best if I, with your indulgence, was able to pass over to Paul so he could give us a good overview on that action plan and give you that reassurance that we're on the right journey to get this fixed and fixed quickly.
Thank you, Malcolm. If you could do that, Paul, please.
Thank you, Convener. To answer the first part of the question in terms of where I think the failings have been, I've picked this up in June and read the audit report, and I think it is down to two main activities. One is having the single comprehensive framework for the management of not only Legionella but all statutory compliance, with a dedicated board or working group to oversee all the activities. There is many different moving parts across many services, ranging from responsible persons, facilities managers, caretakers, all with a role and a responsibility in managing, Legionella and wider compliance or water quality, as opposed to just Legionella. What we've agreed from June, having read the report, is that we will establish that comprehensive framework where there will be a property compliance working group that will be overseen by a dedicated board, and that will be chaired by myself. There'll be a centralised team created within Place Services as part of our corporate landlord, and within that there will be a person who is dedicated to water quality. One of the key areas that we need a lot of action on is the responsible persons as identified for each and every operational property, and that seems to be something that's an immediate action, and that those persons in the buildings know their responsibilities, are well aware of the requirements of the premises management handbook, and if they don't, they are trained to ensure that they have that in place. And there needs to be, when there is issues identified, there needs to be a comprehensive recording of those with clear actions and timescales for completion, with those who are responsible reporting back on their progress, because that's the only way to ensure that when items are identified, that they are then progressed through to completion. And I think that's because there's been many different people involved, that's where it has fallen down, because people have maybe done individual parts and it hasn't been recorded and hasn't been taken over. And the other thing is that we need to ensure finally that where those works are undertaken or identified to deal with mitigate risks, is that they're actually recorded as being complete, as opposed to being remaining outstanding, and a lack of clarity as to whether that has been done. So I hope committee can take assurance that, having picked this up, there is a comprehensive programme of actions there. I think we're something like 21 individual recommendations coming out of the audit. Every single one has been accepted. Every single one has got a designated person responsible for undertaking those. And the timetable for the latest one being completed, which are the lower level ones, is the end of the calendar year. So hopefully you can take a bit of assurance that hopefully we don't have this situation arising again, and we'll be moving to full assurance in the future pretty quickly.
Convener, thank you for that, Paul and Malcolm. It may be appropriate, but I'll take the convener's advice on whether or not we could have a report back to the next audit committee around the action plan and the progress of that. And a question to Isabel as to whether or not a follow-up audit would be taking place, and the timescale for that, so that we can actually have the assurance about that progress.
Thank you, John. Isabel, question?
Yeah, no problem. Absolutely. Because it's a no assurance report, we would be looking to do more follow-up. Generally, that we've spoke about it previously, and that twice a year I bring the outstanding recommendations to this committee. So that will happen anyway. If recommendations are going past their due dates, then they will come to this committee as being overdue. But also, I think it does warrant a further follow-up review, another audit, and I would look to be putting that in next year's programme. So somewhere around 24 in the 24-25 programme would be a full audit again to check exactly where it was.
Thank you, Isabel. As a lead auditor and qualified Legionella certificated person myself, would it be possible for the committee to get a copy of the recommendations and the action plan, please?
So I think, convener, just to clarify, I think Councillor Meiklejohn was suggesting that the committee get a report back to the next meeting on the progress. So that report would have, I think from what Paul said, the 21 recommendations and the actions against them. So that would come as part of the next report, if the committee agrees to request that.
Thank you for that. Councillor Hannah?
I would just echo the things that have already been said and say I think it is really important that in a very short space of time, like to the next meeting, we have a report including the action plan, the recommendations. Obviously, until such time as action has been taken, it's not possible for Isabel to do the audit, so that would be reasonably into next year.
Councillor Spears?
Thank you. I have two questions. One for Isabel. First question, do you think this is serious enough to go to scrutiny? Because we need to do a full investigation after the pandemic, when we had the problem, especially with schools, and that'll be my next question to Mr. Greenhorn. There was stuff put in place to make sure that these water facilities were checked. So do you think we should take this to scrutiny to fully examine why this hasn't been carried out for the last few years? And my next question to Mr. Greenhorn, I would imagine there's a rigid procedure within schools on checking for some Legionella where they're so densely populated with young people.
Gary, could you answer first, please?
I can, thanks, convener, and thanks for the question, Councillor Spears. Firstly, we do take it seriously. In terms of schools, we do have a robust checking system in schools that checks both the Legionella in terms of when the schools are closed through going into effectively flush the taps, flush the pipes, and we also do regular and checking on the water temperature at both high level and low level through the Sentinel taps. I would say that in terms of the audit report, as my colleague Mr. Kettrick says, we do agree the recommendations, and when we looked at the incident that affected us, it was through staff shortage, and we've made steps to remedy that already because we do take it seriously. We learned the lessons over the COVID. We worked successfully over COVID to reopen schools on time, and I can give a guarantee that that robust system for Legionella is in place in the school system, albeit there are now and again wee blips to staff shortage, but through the actions that Mr. Kettrick said, we can overcome them with a more robust system in place to check all properties across all our estate. Thank you, convener.
No, that's great, and you'll have the records then. There'll be strict record keeping, I would imagine, on that.
All schools do keep records of when the checks are done, Councillor Spears, and we have a central check when we do the programme of flushing over the school holiday period, and that's managed centrally.
Thank you, Gary. I believe it's more appropriate for Brian to answer your other question, Councillor Spears.
Yeah, thanks. It's maybe just to say the committee's already asked for a report, and obviously you'll get that in November. It's not out with your remit to ask or to refer a report to scrutiny if you think there's an issue, but I think maybe at this point it's a little bit early. I think it's more appropriate for you to call for the report, see what the action plan is and what progress has been made, because there's presumably endpoints that will have been met by or should have been met by the time the report comes in November. And if you're happy with that, you could always ask for other reports to keep on top of this. But at any point, if you're not happy with what you think's been progressed, you could refer this to scrutiny to ask them to undertake a deeper dive. But I think for the time being, it's maybe just better just to wait for the report in November and just see, because as Mr. Kettrick says, the plan's in place, the actions have been carried out, so progress is in hand.
I think we're happy with what's been progressed, but we thought this was done 2 years ago, so we're unhappy that what was progressed 2 years ago hasn't been carried out. That's a concern.
Thank you, Councillor Spears. Does anyone else have any questions? Councillor Forrest.
Thanks. I'd like to ask, there are 229 operational buildings. We've sampled 5, which is less than 2.5% of them. Are we satisfied that given Legionella is such a serious thing that we have a large enough sample? Or is that a standard sample?
Yeah, I can actually answer that one as an auditor. That's roughly a correct sample size.
Okay, thank you.
But can Isabel just confirm that, please?
Yeah, no problem. We tried to get a mix of different types of area to look at, different services, different buildings. So the time that was taken, it became more intensive because of the amount of paperwork to go through and to check. So ideally, we could try and do more, but it's the time constraints and trying to get through all of these. As you know, as Paul was saying earlier, there are 21 recommendations. Each of those recommendations, some of them actually have multiple parts. So, and they're very specific to those buildings, but they can then carry forward throughout all the buildings. But if we do a bigger sample, you know, we could be, it would have taken even longer to do the report. And if you remember rightly, when we came with it at the June committee, it was still ongoing then, and it was mainly because of that. It was because it was just taking so long to get through all the paperwork, visit the sites. So yeah, I think 5 was reasonable in this instance.
Thank you for that, Isabel. Thank you.
Does anyone else have any questions on this part of the report? Move on to the other parts of the report. Councillor Meikle-John.
Thank you, Convener. Just looking for a bit of clarification really around the IP and the updated guidance, which refers to particularly to schools and the recovery of debt. Firstly, what would be that debt? How much is it? And how is it actually recovered?
I come to Gary on this one, please.
Okay, thank you, Convener. In terms of the last identification of the level of debt within our school sector, it was around £65,000. We did a number of mitigations to try to recover the debt. Some of the debt is caused by the IP system, the transition from P7s to S1. So there's a number of informal approaches that schools made to parents to clear up debt. There were some instances where our poverty strategy, when we looked at it, those children that had applied for free school meals had incurred some debt up to the point of the application being granted. And we looked at some discretionary changes to the system there to make sure that we accommodated it. So at the moment, we're still probably in the early part of the new term, and we're still looking to recover some of the debt, but we've made good progress to letter parents to try to get some of the debt. And I know that certainly in the first 2 or 3 weeks of term, a lot of the money that was outstanding at the end of term has came in. I'm unable to give an up-to-date position on this now. I don't have that position, but I can certainly get it if members wish.
Okay, Gary, maybe out with this committee, it might be worth a conversation about managing that debt. I mean, I appreciate this is an audit, but just about the practicalities of that debt and those involved. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hannah, do you have anything?
Nothing at the moment, thank you.
Does anyone else have anything to raise?
Convener, the only other thing I would have asked is about the arrangements with West Lothian and to why they were chosen as our peer to do the review, and just whether or not we are content with the work that was done there and we felt that was a fair outcome from that.
Thank you, Councillor Meikle-John. Isabel?
We do reciprocal work with West Lothian. It's a historic arrangement that we've had for a number of years. So obviously internal audit is an independent function, so able to then audit every area of the council. Whereas because risk management sits with me, you know, we can't audit ourselves. So that's why West Lothian come in and audit specifically risk for us. We also did the same piece of work for them because they're in exactly the same position as we are. So the report was at a time where we were almost transitioning anyway with risk management. We were looking at different options. You'll know yourselves where risk has come up quite a number of times and about trying to improve that. So the audit came at quite a good time to look at all of that, and more or less the recommendations that came out, I think there were about 5, were around areas. They were easy to accept. Being on the receiving end of an audit for a change, they were easy to accept because we were more or less doing those things anyway, and we were already looking at it. So we weren't concerned in any way with what came back, and we were already taking action to try and improve what we were doing with risk management. I think one of the things that came out as a bit of a theme was around changing it too much, almost, that we had to have a period of not changing and trying to make some improvements and stick with them for a while without continually trying to tinker.
Okay. Councillor Hannah, you anything? Councillor Spears?
Yeah, you're saying you have a reciprocal arrangement with West Lothian Council, and this has been on a long-term basis. I think you'll have heard the previous debate regarding the risk management and Legionella. So do you think this is healthy? And some things have obviously been overlooked. So will this go on forever, or will other councils come in and audit?
We would choose who we wanted to have that agreement with, and it's worked well with West Lothian Council. In terms of your specific question about Legionella, those discussions have already been happening recently with the corporate management team about where Legionella sits on a corporate risk register and keeping an eye on it going forward as a separate risk potentially. Hopefully that answers.
Well, it doesn't actually take us anywhere forward because we thought it was a substantial risk to the people that use our facilities. And what I'm saying here is it's obviously been overlooked in the past. Everything's great in retrospect, and I appreciate that, but and it will be rectified for the future. But we've been audited by the same group who haven't picked up on that, and that's a concern.
West Lothian didn't specifically look at what was on our corporate risk register or Legionella either. What they looked at was the processes around how we manage risk and the groups that we've got in place within the council to provide all the updates on risk. And it looked specifically at the role of the corporate risk management group. So it didn't in any way look at Legionella.
In other words, Councillor Spears, it wasn't within the scope of the audit. Councillor Hannah.
Thank you, Convener. Can I just have a look at the question of the complexity of the risk management process? The report refers to some concerns about the complexity of the process. Does the Chief Finance Officer accept these concerns, and is there plans for the way in which we can improve on that?
Thank you,
Amanda.
Thank you, Convener. Thank you, Councillor Hannah. So West Lothian were making comment about the amount of change that was being made, and I think there was change being made, but I think some of that was about trying to continually improve what we do. However, I think we did recognise that the system that we had in place at the time of the audit was a bit too complicated, and we also had the feedback from audit committee, for example, when you reviewed the risk reports, to say that some of the risk reports were a bit complicated, a bit difficult to understand. So we have been working on what we do with that, and we have got some proposals for streamlining and improving the process and just having a bit more clarity about roles and responsibilities. And it will be due to bring a risk update report back to the next audit committee. So we would put some of that report on some of that. What I would say is just reiterate the point that Isabel made, that once we do that, we recognise in the recommendations in West Lothian, in the West Lothian audit report, we need to just give that time to bed in. We need to work with it for 12 months, see how well it works before we would look to change anything again. So I think we have a good way forward, and we'll be bringing some information back to committee on that.
Thank you.
Has anyone else got any further questions? I have one. And it's very basic. It's the Lothian report terms assurance is satisfactory. Where does that sit with our ratings?
So every audit team, we follow the same types of assurance level. We just call them something different. Sometimes some councils have 4 different assurances, and they range from a comprehensive, so right down to a no assurance, which you will recognise as one of ours. We have substantial assurance. Their satisfactory is around our substantial assurance. They have one above that, which is called effective, which would be like a comprehensive, which we don't have. So it sits around our substantial. And to note, it mentions if there were high risk. We didn't have any outcomes that were high risk, so therefore it sat at quite a good level. There were 2 levels beneath, which would be around our limited and our no assurance, and obviously we went in that category. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Do we have any further questions? No? So if I get Brian just to summarise the decision.
Thank you, Convener. Just if I'm clear, I think the committee have agreed to ask for a follow-up report to the next meeting, which sets out the action plan for Legionella, showing all the recommendations and the progress made to date. And not for the decision, but also just being mindful that depending on the scrutiny of that report, the committee might be minded to refer the matter to scrutiny for further investigation. But for today, the decision is simply to call for the report. Just double check everybody's agreed.
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 Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. If there's no further questions, then I'm happy to call this meeting to a close.
Thank you, Convener.
Thank you.
Thank you.